I'd like to start by acknowledging the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, upon whose ancestral lands our city campus now stands. I'd also like to pay respect to the elders, both past and present, acknowledging them as the traditional custodians of knowledge for this land. So, hi everyone, my name's Lauren. I'm the AI editor for Central News. I'm a third year journalism student here at UTS. And I'm really interested in AI and how it's going to impact, as a journalism student, how it's going to impact the career that I go into.
And my name is Rex. I'm a journalist and a media prize editor here at Central News. I was working with Michael on the journalism and AI project at the Centre of Media Transition. And I love AI, and I'm pretty interested in it. And now I work at ABC News with my colleague Kevin and Maryanne.
Yeah, so we decided to run this event because as many of you in the room are journalism students, so you're going to be the future of news and media, and so bringing the knowledge of AI and getting on top of it now will really hopefully help you in your careers that you're going into. So we hope today's a chance for you all to learn more about how Gen AI is changing news currently. We'll talk a bit about ethics and what are the ethical ways to be using AI and how's it currently being used in unethical ways potentially, and of course the future of the newsroom. So today is also a discussion, so we'll be chatting with our guests, but it's an interactive talk, so feel free, put your hand up, ask questions. If you've got comments to add to this discussion, we want you guys to get involved. So, don't feel like it's just a panel up here of us chatting, but really feel free to ask questions as we go along, and we will also do a Q&A at the end. And then the final part of this will just be a bit of a network session where you will have pizzas coming. So you either have snacks and chat with one another and come chat one-on-one with our guests to ask them any other questions about AI. Also, we will be taking photos and videos throughout this, so if you would prefer not to be in any, just let Lucas know. That's totally fine. All right, let's get straight into things. So firstly, I'd like to introduce our guests who have kindly taken the time out of their very busy schedules. Some have been up since 3 a.m, so thank you very much for being here and making it to today's chat. I'll start by introducing our first guest, Maryanne. Maryanne is a digital producer and data journalist at ABC News. She's also a fellow of the London School of Economics Journalism AI Research Programme for 2023, along with our other guest, Kevin. With over a decade of experience, Maryanne has worked as an editor, print and online journalist, video producer, AI researcher and coder, creating podcasts, documentaries and written pieces for the Sunday Telegraph, the Daily Telegraph and ABC Sydney.
And Michael, it's a research fellow at UTS Centre for Media Transition, which is conducting a research project on the implication of generative AI in public interest journalism. He previously worked at the Australian Communication and Media Authority, where he provided regulatory advice on misinformation. He currently teaches media ethics and regulation at the University of Sydney.
Yeah, and our final guest, Kevin, is an award-winning producer and digital forensics reporter with ABC Investigations. He specialises in open source intelligence and has contributed his expertise to the Washington Post, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Vice, and many more. And he was the 29 recipient of both the Ian Carroll Scholarship for Innovations and an MJ Baer Fellow for Young Leaders in Digital Journalism in the US. Kevin is also a fellow of the London School of Economics Journalism AI Research Programme for 2023. So can we please give a warm welcome to our guests? So we've mentioned a couple times already the Journalism AI Research Programme. Just a quick background, because we will be referencing it a few times in today's chat, but it's a world-leading research initiative on the impacts of AI in journalism. And their latest report was actually published this month, and it's a global survey that provides a lot of background information. They've researched over 105 small and large newsrooms across 46 countries. So I'd highly recommend in your own time to look through this report. because it provides a lot of information that is very useful to see how it actually is currently impacting the news and also the future and what ways newsrooms predict it will continue to impact. So yeah, the survey also, one of the main things the survey revealed was 90% of newsrooms are currently using AI in some form during news production, which is quite interesting to hear. So 9 in 10 newsrooms currently using it.
We also want to stress that today this talk is interactive, so please feel free to raise your hand if you have anything to add, and we hope to create a dialogue between many of you who are students who are going to be the future of journalism, and that's why we initiated this talk, and not just hear from these experts, but also every one of you.
Yeah. So we'll start by asking, what are your current roles with AI in what you guys are doing with journalism?
Anyone want to go first?
I can start.
Yeah, please.
Unlike Kevin, I am not award-winning yet, but I hope to be very soon. So what I'm currently doing...
I'm award-losing as well, just so you know.
Multiple-time award-losing, though, so that's this guy. What I'm currently doing, so I just finished, I came off a research project of how the ABC News can integrate an AI, generative AI chatbot within all of our online features. So I finished building and training that model and presenting the outcomes to that so that we can move it into the prototyping phase for ABC News. I'm also doing some technical work for the fellowship that we spoke about, looking at our specific research area is bias in media and how we can use AI, which has been historically seen as something that is biased in itself, how we can use it as a tool to fight against bias in pre-publication of news stories that can roll out to newsrooms across the world. So it's in multiple languages and it's an annotated generative AI with multiple models as well, which I can go into more later. Was that about AI that I'm talking about?
Yeah, AI.
Sorry, I'm the one that was up since 3, so if I start rambling, it's because of that. I don't know if I told you, but I've been up since 3. I'm going to bring that up quite a lot. So those are the works that we're currently doing, and the part where 9 out of 10 newsrooms are using AI is not very surprising for us because our newsroom didn't even realize we were using generative AI before the term kind of happened. We were using transcription tools like Otter and Trint before we even knew that was, or before we even labeled that as AI. So it's something that a lot of newsrooms are doing to ease the more boring or labour-intensive parts of their day-to-day processes. And I think for me and the work that I'm doing, that's where I see AI moving for newsrooms. It's reducing the kind of laborious side of journalism to allow the reporters to actually focus on things that they love to do, like talking to people and doing the things that only humans can do, which is, writing things that are emotive, whereas AI would not be able to do that as good. Kevin.
Oh, thank you. Hi, everyone. It's so good to see so many faces here today. When Rex kind of did this, I was like, oh, there's only 2 people going to show up, so it's really nice to see people here. So the way Maryanne is right. We had been using AI for a very, very long time. I would say probably from like 2010. I think it's really, really important to distinguish and maybe it's good to define what AI is before we actually start this. Historically, we've been using what's called machine learning for a very, very long time. So it'll be something like, I work with a lot of video analysis software. So I'll be like, try to teach a video, can you spot a bike in this? So it's basically showing it what a bike is, and then in subsequent analysis, the machine will then try to figure out, let's say, a bike has 2 wheels, it has handles, and that's the kind of iterative process. What AI is in the kind of common public lexicon at the moment is large language models, which are quite different to what we have historically used. So large language models, are like ChatGPT, it's like, can you write my resume? Can you write my essay? Can you write my cover letter? That kind of stuff. Can you write me a story about blah, blah, blah? And that's a pretty recent development. I would say it has kind of exploded the most in a year and a half. And when we talk about the future of newsrooms, we're not talking about when I was teaching a video analysis software to spot a bicycle. We're talking about, can you talk and function or sound, convincingly sound like a human? And that has occurred probably in the last 12 months, mostly. So without getting too much into it, some fun stories. The kind of AI software I've been using, or the things that I've been using. First one, I've been using a lot of facial recognition. I've been using that since about 2014. In a current iteration of a story that I'm working on right now is I've been trying to chase people who've been catfishing people online. One example was somebody had matched with me on a dating app. So what I did was I ran their face through all these different facial recognition systems, and now I'm going through this, story's not out, but I'm going through this deep labyrinth where I've tracked them down to this human trafficking kind of ring in Dubai. So it's a very, it's from one simple facial recognition search. That is something I couldn't have done alone. But that is the kind of power that we've had for a very, very long time. In terms of other things, transcription, audio kind of recognition, but what AI actually is, and I think it's really important to understand this, particularly when you're dealing with large language models, AI is simply a kind of output of really precise, complex mathematical probabilities. So who here has actually used ChatGPT? Who understands how it works and is confident enough to actually talk about it right now? Exactly. So to get really nerdy for a moment, what it effectively is, so AI is when you're using ChatGPT as an example, it's predicting words. So if I said United States of, what is everyone's third word going to be?
America.
Yeah, exactly. You're not going to say United States of Canada or United States of North Korea or something like that. You're going to say United States of America. And what the machine is actually doing is it has all this data and it's kind of saying, yep, based off of probability, America is going to be the word. Now, that is an extremely complex and precise calculation. And that is exactly what large language models is. And that is what newsrooms are currently dealing with and struggling and freaking out about now. Because that is not something those old machine learning models could do. So where we are looking into bringing it now is can we use those predictive models into our newsroom, or what does that say? I'm sure we'll get back to it later, but I wanted to lay the foundation there because that is actually the essence of what the current struggle or the current questions, the big ones are. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Shall I just talk a bit about the research project?
Your current roles, and of course.
So at the Centre for Media Transition here at UTS, we are doing a project on journalism and AI, so its use in Australian newsrooms, implications for news, for the news industry, and for the broader information environment. We have been conducting interviews with Australian newsrooms, including the ABC, just to see, how they are thinking about using generative AI, and what kind of awareness they have of the risks and how they might be thinking about mitigating those risks. And also we're doing a survey of what's happening around the world, so other countries drawing on literature like we saw from the LSE, Charlie Beckett and so on. And then I guess building an assessment of where things are likely to go and what we need to be aware of. So I guess, we've interviewed about 10 newsrooms so far, and just, I won't name names, but just in terms of the general findings, I guess, it does seem that there's quite a variety of different approaches and responses to generative AI in newsrooms. And a lot of that has to do with the size of the newsroom, number of staff, the budget, and so on. So some newsrooms, obviously, some media organisations have a lot bigger budget to devote to these investigations and experiments of how generative AI might be useful, what the opportunities are. Other newsrooms haven't put much thought into it at all. They're aware of what's happening. They're either waiting to see, or they're just, they've got their nose to the grindstone and are doing their work. I guess one interesting aspect of it is how is it going to affect news business models? And I think different kinds of news organisations are going to approach the tools quite differently. A lot of the digital natives, for example, might be seeing it as a real opportunity to reduce costs. Perhaps looking more at the generative capabilities of AI tools. Others are thinking about exactly very focused tools at the back end. How can help with research, data analysis, and that kind of thing. I think most of the bigger newsrooms around the world are looking at that side of things, and some of them have teams dedicated, including the ABC, I think, dedicated to investigating the opportunities for these tools. In terms of risks, I guess, there has been some thought about the risks, and most newsrooms are pretty cautious at the moment, and a lot of them have just instituted bans on using ChatGPT, for example, for generating editorial content, which is a good sign. How long that lasts remains to be seen, I guess. But certainly in our talks with newsrooms, there's an awareness of the risks and the threats to kind of ethical journalistic practice, and how much of that is rhetoric and how much of that breaks down in the face of cost pressures. And this was another matter.
Right, thank you. Michael just interviewed the director of journalism AI last week, and CMT has just produced the full episode of the chat, and it's available now. It's called The Real Implication of Generative AI, so feel free to have a look at that.
Yes, the podcast is called Double Take. Yes, Double Take CMT podcast. Yeah, Charlie Beckett.
Lovely.
So you guys are...
We've spoken to Charlie Beckett before, yeah.
So what is your fellowship involve? I'm interested.
Yeah. Well, I'm actually very interested in what you were saying also, and whether or not you're finding a lot of media organisations are particularly risk averse, like the ABC seems to be a little bit. Our research is about identifying bias in pre-publication.
Specifically ethnic bias and not political bias.
So gender, racial bias as well, but we have dabbled into political and other kinds of bias as well. So we've been training a LLM on examples of both biased news publications and unbiased news, and then asking it to change the model and then annotate those changes based on our ratings, audits, fact checking. I don't know what you call it.
We're teaching a bot how to spot racism.
Yeah, and the reasons why it's racist or it's sexist, or so we've been reading a lot of Breitbart content, which is great, real fun to read that stuff. And then we are teaching this model that there's a different way we could phrase this, and then having it give an output, and then rating that output for 1 to 3. So 1 being poor and 3 being great, and then taking those in different models. So we're using Llama, ChatGPT, Flan. What else are we using? I've forgotten them all now.
We're not using Bard yet.
No, we're not using Bard. And we're using these data sets. So we're using the wiki neutrality corpus and the. What's the other one that we always laugh at? Babe. The pig. The Babe data set. And so we're using these examples of bias in media, and then we're having the model change these examples and then annotate the changes. And the idea is that we're creating this plugin that would be like a Grammarly for newsrooms. So when you have something biased, it'll have like the little dealie that comes back like, hey, that's a bit messed up, and giving you the opportunity to change it. So the power remains with the editorial side, with the journalist. It's not going to change your text for you, but it gives you the option to be like, this is what we've read your content, this is why we think this is problematic, and this is a potential change to that.
Yeah, but the point is that we're very transparent about where that data comes from. So it's really two things. I think our initial take on this project, which we're calling Bias Blocker.
It's Bias Blocker, so download it.
Not yet, it's not ready. The thing that we're effectively trying to do is we are firstly trying to actually determine how well these large language models like ChatGPT, like the llamas, which is large language something or other, basically all the tools that you use to generate script and words and stories or text, and seeing like, firstly, what do you consider bias or problematic or political or sexist or not woke or whatever those people, whatever the lexicon is nowadays, and then taking it from there. And to be honest, it was it was a little bit worse than what we thought it would be.
So the model is dumb. So that's something that we've learned from the outset. People think this idea that they've got this LLM and it's going to do everything, it's going to write your cover letter and it's going to be amazing, but it's really stupid. So you have to take it by the hand and really step it through every process. So sometimes what we found during our fact checking is it would unnecessarily change things. You've got like heaps of examples.
I think one example is we gave it a thing, I think, where it's like, these far right Nazis descended on, like the sentence was, these far right Nazis descended on this chateau or this one town. And then we go, okay, unbias this effectively. And if you unbias this, what's it going to come back with? Then it comes back, people of various views come back have descended on this town. We're like, okay, I see where you're going with this, but it's like, that's not quite it. And look, I think part of the reason it is so dumb, and back again to understanding the foundations of this, is that all of this is based on data that currently exists. So, open dictionaries, articles, this machine learns through huge data, and then it works off the parameters we give it. So a parameter with like ChatGPT, which is notoriously has a lot of rails and safeguards, which is a really good and can be a problematic thing, but it's effectively, it doesn't want to be offensive at all. It doesn't want to be offensive at all. And then what it ends up doing is sounding really insecure because it's learning from other models or like other texts about what it means to be not like, apolitical, neutral. It's that own interpretation of neutrality. And that's why we've kind of run into the first problem where it's like, oh, you don't know what bias and racism and sexism looks like, and you can't talk about it because the people feeding you the data, which is us, everyone in this room, whether when you post on Reddit or you post on Google or do news articles, because the general population doesn't know how to talk about it. So the foundational idea of our project, and I remember we went to ramen across the road to talk about this when we came up with the idea.
All the best ideas done over ramen noodles.
Was that one of the earliest iterations of AI, which have actually been being used for like 6-7 years, is the AI that actually reads your cover letter and your resume. And there was an experiment or an investigation which found that people who, like HR companies, which ran a lot of AI to quickly read someone's CV to see if they're appropriate, in terms of successful applicants, were people who played lacrosse. And you think, what? Is lacrosse like a highly valid thing? And then when you actually break it down, what it's actually doing is that the company's feeding, going, hey, this is what a successful person looks like. This is our CEO. This is our chief financial officer. This is our blah, blah, blah. And they all went to private school. And so they all played lacrosse. So the machine goes, okay, even though you told me not to look at gender, not to look at race when considering potentially successful applicants, based off your model, they all play lacrosse because they all go to there, because people in those positions of power are private school people, and that is not always an accurate reflection of talent and success and credibility. So we wanted to tackle that problem from simply a language model, and we knew we would run into this problem, and it's actually a lot worse than we expected. No.
Sorry, can I ask a question? But is the purpose there to use that plugin on human-generated content?
Yes.
Check it for bias.
Yes.
Yes.
So I think sometimes it's not just like remove slurs from your copy or something like that. That's not what we're trying to do.
Yeah, it's unconscious bias a lot of the time as well. It's like a reason, we want to give the reason as to why it would be not the best phrasing to be. So we're also doing this in Arabic, so it's a lot of idioms within the Arabic language as well. So it's the reasoning behind not using it, like using the terminology third world when referring. It's something that newsrooms do all the time, but we're annotating the reason as using the UN Convention dictionary of it, why third world would not be an appropriate thing for a newsroom to publish. But ultimately putting the decision in the journalist and the editor's hands. It's not going to, we're not about replacing journalists, because I know that's a really big fear and there is a really big hesitancy even in our newsroom about that. It's a tool to assist and to make sure that reporting into the future is getting better and not getting worse, or not using it to have a worse outcome.
Yeah, and we also prove robots aren't very good at making those judgment decisions. So even if we don't come up with a product afterwards, the pursuit of what we're doing is, I would say, quite worthy.
Yeah. Let's dive into that. So you've just touched on AI, and I think a big fear that like everyone has, it's something that I constantly, when I'm chatting with people, they constantly say, well, is AI going to take our jobs away? And I think that's something people are constantly wondering and questioning, and especially in journalism, it's a big question people are wondering. What are your guys' thoughts on that? And yeah, do you think AI has the potential to take journalists' jobs away, or is the human aspect always required at the end of the day?
I like to think about it like this, because I do love working with AI, but this is the analogy that I like to think of it as. And I read this, I don't even remember where I read it, but I look at AI as like a tribute band. So you really want to go see the real band. That's the real thing. A human is the real band. An AI, generative AI is never going to be the real band, right? They're never going to be, Kendrick Lamar on stage, but they're going to be someone that can rap in Kendrick Lamar's style, but it's not going to be his lived experience. And so whatever you're going to get from it is going to have that kind of cringe, kind of underlying thing of it's not actually real. So no, I don't think, this is my big takeaway, as much as I love the world of generative AI and I love working in this field and I love doing data and coding, it's not going to take anyone's job, because what we love about journalism is not just the stories that are being told, but the people that are telling them. It's just as important. And I don't think, as clever as an LLM can be, I don't think it's going to get a soul.
Yeah, I think the main point is one that you both brought up, which is really that although it's called artificial intelligence, it really isn't intelligent.
No.
And it's a tool that you can use, and the results depend on what you put into it and the questions that you are asking. It can't think for you. It can't generate incisive reasoning to get behind what's really happening out there in the world, for example, in political machinations and so on. It can't do that for you. It can be a tool for analysis. It can find patterns in data. It can pick up, biased language and those kinds of things. And I'm sure a whole lot of uses that we haven't even imagined yet. Well, you can at least try to train it to do that, right? But it will get better as well. So as you said before, it's only generative AI has only been around for a couple of years now. And most famously since ChatGPT was released. But yeah, so I agree. I don't think it's going to take journalists' jobs away. Some jobs will probably disappear. Just like when the computer was invented.
The guy
typesetters and that. Yeah,
the guy who loaded in the tapes.
Exactly. Yeah. So some jobs disappeared, and what happens is that other people end up doing more jobs than they did before, and I think that's what's going to happen.
But then also new jobs are created, like Microsoft doing system prompt writers. It's just a specific role just to write system prompts. I'm so sorry.
Not at all. I do think that, yes, so it actually might end up creating more work for individual journalists. They can have to become pretty good at using these tools and so on, and maybe it'll increase their workloads. I also think that there's a whole range of jobs, like verifying information, for example, keeping the human in the loop and so on.
If I could just point out too, this building that we're in at the moment is the old Sydney Morning Herald building. And in the basement they used to have the printers, the printing presses, which would roll out the papers, and they had compositors on the floor above that. And then they had the photographic, and then they had newsroom. And all of that has changed over the last 40 years. And this is an industry that has always evolved with technology and just used it differently, but there have always been jobs around. That hasn't changed.
Can I have permission to take a slightly contrarian
Oh my
approach
God,
to
you're
all
going to
this?
say it's going to kill us all.
Yeah,
Skynet.
Anyone watch Westworld at all? Yeah. Yeah, like there's a line in like the third episode or something where one of the characters asks a woman, and he goes, it's like, are you real or are you one of them, like the robots? And then she replies, if you can't tell the difference, doesn't matter. And I feel like we've been blindsided by the growth of AI in the past year because of the constraints of our imagination. Like, I'm really, really on the ball with technology, and I could not have predicted how fast it's moved. And, it doesn't surprise me because between, as you say, I don't think it's right to say that journalism evolves with technology. It does, but I think perhaps a more accurate way to put it is that journalism is particularly sensitive to changes in technology. We talk about, the SMH being here, and then they moved to Piedmont, but that used to be 5 levels, and now it's down to 1. Like, whether we like it or not, the truth is that journalism has shrunk. I think all the major news organizations in Australia and around the world are smaller than what they used to be. Yes, there are new ones that have cropped up in its place, and those are the ones who are able to have a front foot forward. I'm a really, really big fan of Vox, for example, and that's because they knew how to do extremely highly well-produced videos ahead of time, long before everyone else, and now everyone is just catching up. But the reason I bring this up is because journalism has been defined by its business models. The fact that TV took off. There's this, if you haven't read it, I really recommend that you read Tim Wu's Attention Merchants. It goes through a really, really interesting look about why radio couldn't keep up with TV, even though it, the radio industry really, really wanted to destroy the television industry. But it all comes down to basically who's paying for news, and whether that's the taxpayer or people subscribing. All newsrooms, and this is the way that I see it, and it's a little bit dystopian, particularly to tell to a room full of potential journalism students. But, the way I see it is that the people who are making decisions about how much money is spent aren't the ones in the newsrooms. So they are mostly interested, and this is not just the newspapers and the broadcast stations. These are, whether or not you're being funded by the taxpayers. So if you're a broadcaster like the ABC or the SBS, like they will find every reason to not pay or not to spend as much money because the audience for news is fractured as well. So when people are given a tool to say, hey, we can cut your newsroom in half because we don't need the writers, like that's gonna impact us a lot more. And from someone who's in the trenches, we talk about all these new technologies doing really great stuff for us. All the AI newsrooms in America right now, they're not using AI in any way that is publishing based. They're using it as smarts or making things more efficient. So auto-translating weather alerts from Spanish to English is something that I've seen recently. We're working in projects, our fellows at the London School of Economics are working on projects where it's like, okay, I've written 100 stories about the invasion of Ukraine. Can you put all of this into a timeline for me? And that's the tool that they're building. Yeah, it's really cool, yeah. And that's great, but at the same time, like, if I had to be honest, like, holy crap, I've been doing more work than ever, despite using all these tools. And that is not because I've been given more work, it's because other people are losing their jobs and it falls into the rest of that. So that for me is the pragmatic look.
Adapt or die.
Adapt or die. It's a little bit cynical. It's not, I'm quite
Can
an
I come back at you?
Oh, please.
Yeah.
So,
I want to fight him too.
Okay, great.
I agree, but I mean, a lot of the changes in journalism over the last 20 years are a problem of revenue, right? Revenue pressures and so on. And yes, under those kinds of revenue pressures, of course, the business side of the business is going to look at saving costs. But if you want to be a cut price journalism outfit in today's journalism world, you can do it. You can go out there and set up a very low cost website, churns out content, listicles, whatever you want. You can do that already, but most newsrooms are not doing that. Most newsrooms are trying to produce good news, however they define it, and there are different approaches to that. But they are in the business of trying to produce news that the audience wants, and I think that's not going to change. And as long as that demand is there, then there's going to be space for proper journalists doing their jobs. And certainly those jobs are going to change, but unless AI kind of affects the revenue side of things as well, then I don't think in those quality newsrooms that it's going to have as big of an effect as people.
I think the larger newsrooms, they're the ones who are putting, those lines of demarcation where it's like, we're not using this, or if you're going to use this is how you use it, or very strict things. But, those are the massive legacy companies who are shrinking. And then, in their place, there should be, as you say, like new newsrooms, you can come out, you can do stories that the big ones can't do anymore. But, how are they going to get their foot into the door, if that makes sense? Like, it's harder than ever to, actually, if the phrase you said is like news that people want. And my cynical, or not cynical, but slightly pessimistic take on this is that if you were to create a new news company tomorrow, would you be more successful if you spent time doing good news, or would you be more successful producing content that people want to, that they automatically conform to their worldview? And when you look at misinformation and you look at all the fringe media things coming out, they definitely take the latter, and those are the ones that lift off. You don't see many good quality new newsrooms prop up anymore, and I don't know how taking the that experience, because to be a journalist you do need a lot of experience. They're very, very smart people, but you need to know how to make phone calls, you need to know how to write well, sell things well, like write headlines, like all those really basic things. As those skills disappear and are probably going to be replaced somewhat by things like large language models, like what's going to happen to the news? And that's the kind of question that I grapple with at the moment.
Can I just step in, because we're saying this with thinking that, my apologies for interrupting, but thinking that this is something that can happen tomorrow, but it's not cost effective to use AI in these newsrooms yet. So it's not something that it's not something that we have to fight with at the moment, because upscaling generative AI to a level that the ABC audience would be able to interact with, or that would have to meet the demands of an ABC newsroom, is just not cost effective. And if it's not cost effective, then the bosses are not going to do it, because again, it's the bottom line. So if it's going to cost them, $9,000 of tokens to work with this ChatGPT model, they're not going to do it. They'd rather just pay a salary and have someone that takes smokos every 15 minutes and just, just take the L in that situation, rather than pay that much for a untested, unred teamed model that could just go rogue and destroy their reputation. Because reputation in journalism is pretty much the biggest thing. Being trustworthy, being a source of information and not misinformation is some of the biggest things. And if you don't have a source like a generative AI model that cannot guarantee that, then I don't think it's taking anybody's jobs. If it cannot fact check its own work, then nobody's jobs is going to go in that sense. But what it can do is do the busy work that we've always been getting robots to do since, the industrial revolution or the wheel. It's like you're just doing things that we can outsource without taking away the creativity and the essence of what it is to do journalism. And also it's too expensive.
That is the general consensus. Like, I do hear that pop up a lot. Like, AI, it may not replace as many jobs. It might replace the jobs, and it currently has already been replacing certain jobs that are just churning out articles that AI currently is able to do. For example, BuzzFeed they cut multiple staff recently, about 180 staff members, because they found that generative AI was able to do what they were doing. But it can just redefine the role of journalists, is what I do keep hearing popping up. So it's adding to the role that they're doing, and it's allowing journalists to do more of the human aspects of the role. And when AI can step in, it can help with the data and analysing and all those things that can sometimes take longer. Yeah.
Do you think that becoming proficient with the use of AI will help us as young journalists to break into the industry or get a job?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, 100%. I mean, at the moment, when we think about like news models and like the way that we distribute news, there's currently 4 platforms, which is broadcast, audio, and digital. And then the 4th one would be social media. So you don't actually produce things for like like a news site like The Guardian or something. You bring it directly onto social media platforms. As I said, it's probably a lack of imagination, but where we are, the sense that I get is where we are is, and maybe we can't pinpoint it because we just don't know how it's going to look, but you know, compared to other breakthroughs in technology that I've seen, generative AI is accelerating, and it's going to stick, and and people figuring it out, and then people are going to start monopolizing it, and you know, and then they're going to build models off it. You know, there's like 1,000, I think it was something stupid like 1,000 AI startups a month created or something like that in America alone. And then, you know, 990 of those fail within three or 4 months after that because, you know, no one has quite worked it out yet. But, you know, the interesting figure to go with that is that millennials and, you know, baby boomers, most of them don't use AI, but people in Gen Z or younger, 70% of them use it. So it's going to become part of your digital natives in that sense, you know, in the same way that my uncle won't know how to use a phone, or he only sticks with, like, you know, he doesn't do anything besides listen to radio, you know, like that kind of work is going to become so natural to you that I don't think newsrooms have any choice but to deal with it if they want to adapt and survive. So knowing how to use it is actually going to be to your advantage. And there is a possibility that somehow that, you know, the use of generative AI, because there's so much based off data, it's so much based off human data, it could possibly represent a 5th way of telling news. And we kind of have that a little bit already. You know, we kind of use that when it's like, hey, you know, hey Siri, can you give me the headlines and stuff like that, and it'll read stuff to you. You know, that's one very early iteration of that. So, and we know that that's called audio on demand, and audio on demand in terms of the audio field is growing faster than any other kind of things, you know, even more than podcasts lately. So yes, to answer your question. Yeah.
And just to add on that, is there a particular software we should be learning how to use now that will help us?
I don't know. I don't do the nerd stuff.
Oh, that's me. As many as humanly possible. No. And yes. Okay, this field is evolving so fast. So the things that I've been doing, that I was researching for a couple of months ago, when I was presenting this to some people at the ABC about my research, I had to do a massive asterisk and be like, this is all out of date. And it was only like a couple of weeks old. It's moving very, very fast. So I wouldn't say stick to one thing. Getting to know how to do good system prompts and how to work within your own user interface of ChatGPT, that's really helpful. And finding out a little bit about the technical side of it is really helpful as well if you want to try to change your own, train your own model. If you have a server large enough, then cool. But it moves so fast. The best thing about it is staying in front of everything that changes on it. So part of the research project I did was we red teamed, or we adopted a malicious personality to fight this bot. So it was going to be this conversational bot that would be the ABC, and you can talk to it. But I had to red team that as a horrible person, of the member of the public, as if they were going to chat to it in a horrible way. And in that time that I was red teaming that bot, there were so many new advances in red teaming. They had to coin a new phrase for it, that it was violet teaming, that it changed colour in those couple of weeks that I was doing it. There was new strategies, there was new ways to break ChatGPT, both 3.5 and 4. So yes, you should, to answer your question, yes, you should pick a model that you think is going to be particularly useful, or you think that you work really well with, but don't get stuck in it, because it changes so fast, and you have to be open to being flexible and being like, well, that's out of date now.
I would probably invest more in conceptual understandings of language models. So, for example, one of the things that a lot of newsrooms struggled with is like which social media platform to use. You know, it's like, and everyone's kind of investing in Snapchat, and then I'm like, well, no. Snapchat might fall over, and it kind of did. It's not gone, it's still around, but it wasn't the massive force that it used to be. But my recommendation at the time to a lot of newsrooms when I was consulting for them was invest in verticals, like learn how to tell stories on verticals, because that's why Snap is really, really successful. And lo and behold, you know, when we think about verticals, we now think about TikTok and Instagram instead. And like every platform has some kind of vertical now. So, you know, understanding how to tell stories in that format was a lot more useful than understanding how to do one platform. So, you know, the underpinning of generative AI is, as I said, like these, you know, neural networks or deep learning, or like understanding probability, and then, you know, it's like a kind of advanced form of machine learning. Like that, those are the kind of things that you want to invest in and understand. So I don't know any technical languages, as Maryanne was very horrified to learn today. She was like, I thought you knew how to do Python. I'm like, no. The last time I used Python was like in 2008 when I had to, I was playing Skyrim, and then like to get all the mods working together, you had to like learn like 3 lines of Python to like get it working together. Like that is the actual, honest to God, extent of my coding experience. But yet I make a point of actually understanding like all those, like how those models work. Like, you know, I'm not a videographer, but I know what good filmmaking is, and that's why I'm able to work with video producers and documentary makers.
It's like Rick Rubin. He doesn't actually play an instrument, but he knows good music.
Also, I was in a tribute band, so screw you. System of a Down.
When we say that AI, it's not gonna replace human journalism, in terms of like AI is lack of the sensitivity that human journalism is required. But we're seeing like up-to-date examples that BuzzFeed is having layoffs, and News Corp is using AI to produce 3,000 articles per week using AI in Australia. Is that the fear of like being replaced, that this was playing would that be one of the main obstacles that setting back the development and adoption of AI in Australia?
I don't think it would set back the adoption of it. No, I mean, I think you know, as these guys pointed out, you know, if the business case is there, then it will happen. So you know, it is possible, and I think it depends what people want. And you know, I've used the example before of Tumblr, right? Nobody goes to Tumblr anymore. Right? It's a terrible place.
I love Tumblr.
But you know, like, you're not going to go there for quality information, right? So I think it's quite possible that the internet will just keep filling up, because it's, you know, it's infinite. There's no limit to the internet, right? It'll keep filling up with junk. That's fine, right? Let it fill up with junk. It'll happen anyway. But if you have sites on the internet where you know you can find quality information, quality news, you know, they will always be there, and there will always be demand for humans to produce journalism for those sites, because machines just can't do it.
What about and I know we're talking about newsrooms, but I want to bring in independent journalism into this discussion because there is a rise in lots more people, especially young people, looking at independent journalism and social media and having more access to the ability to put their own thoughts out there now. You know, you don't necessarily have to go to work for a big corporation to do that anymore. And how do you guys think AI is now playing into that? And, you know, for us young journalists, can we be using AI right now to work on that as our own journalists?
Part of the really great thing about being a part of a big newsroom is like quality and production. You know, like I don't know how to do animations, or I don't know how to do like, you know, the fancy data visualizations that Maryanne has done with me. You know, our first project together was like trying to find like a bushfire.
We pinpointed the start of a big bushfire.
Yeah, like this, it's down to the tree. And they were like, okay, cool, I can do that, but how am I going to tell this story? And we had a whole production team to do that. And what AI can do for you is actually help you with production. So there was an example where it was a story about the invasion of Ukraine, and someone had run their entire animation through Stable Diffusion. And you know, something like that, it didn't look perfect, and that's fine, but they were able to tell a really compelling animated story just by training the Stable Diffusion model on just war footage and telling that story. And then, you know, I forgot what the is a multimodal when you multimodal is when you, so say Stable Diffusion is images, right? It's like you know, you show a model like 10,000 photos of a dog, and then you're like, give me a dog, and then it'll just like, here's the one. And it will show you some approximation of the dog, depending on how well it's trained. Multimodal is when you tell it's like, hey, can you take this dog and make it run over the harbour bridge or something? And that's effectively what she did. She trained the model with not a whole lot of training, like in terms of her technical skills, but like she basically eventually got this model to build an entire animation for her just by telling it what to do. And you know what? I do that already, not in my work.
We're the models, and he tells us what to do.
Like being really, really nerdy here for a second, like my first foray into AI is like, so I run a lot of Dungeons and Dragons sessions with all my friends and like colleagues and other people. And like, you know, in the past year, like 90% of my visuals have come from exactly that. I'm like, it's like, hey, I need a bleeding orc right now. Can you produce one for me? And it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be exactly what's coming up in my head, but I don't have to learn how to work in Photoshop and then do all this. It's like, it takes me 15 seconds to produce that, and it's kind of good enough. So, you know, as long as you, as young journalists, if you have a good story to tell, but you need a bit of flair and a bit of production cost to go with that, that's the best way to use that at the moment, in my opinion.
One question that we are having is, how do we use AI ethically?
Yep.
It's a big question.
I can tell you how to use it unethically, and we can just go back from there.
If you just look behind us too, it's just a graph. It's taken from the report that we've been talking about. But it's just showing the overall from all the newsrooms that they interviewed. These are all the different, sorry if you guys can see it.
Oh, readers
all
don't
the
care.
different concerns the main concerns that there currently are, that newsrooms have about AI. Which is interesting, but yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I mean, I think artists are really, artists and writers are really concerned about the use of their copyright, their stories and their songs to train AI on. I think they're very much up in arms, and there's an ethical debate about whether or not we should be asking a bot to give me a song that sounds like System of a Down.
You just can't. Only we could.
But
tribute band, Chop Suey.
Is that what your band was called? That's so good. But so there's a discussion to have around that, and whether or not it is ethical to train a model on somebody else's intellectual property. It's also something that our government is really lagging in having any oversight over. I think I see it mirroring in like how we handled cryptocurrency in Australian government, we just didn't really know what to do until all of a sudden we were like, the ATO is taxing everything. And then we put a ban on everything because everyone freaked out about it because people were making money. And so our government doesn't know how to regulate or put any copyright around AI yet, because it doesn't feel like we're stealing content, but we actually are stealing. We're stealing like ideas or vibes. I don't know if you can copyright vibes. So there's like like I feel like the concerns are valid, even if readers don't really care. I think as content makers, with what we do, we create content and we're creating stuff that we hope reflects our own individual kind of styles. We should be thinking about how that's being used and how that's being taken and changed by generative AI and LLMs.
I think that's interesting. I mean, most of the newsrooms we've spoken to have blocked the web crawlers from OpenAI, for example, which have been crawling news websites in order to gather data to respond to user prompts. It's interesting. So definitely people are trying to wall off their content, I guess, or their intellectual property. I don't know whether that's necessarily a good thing either. So if you think about, what are the ethics of news and news production, what the role that news plays in society, right, in getting information out there, what you might call an open knowledge, open information, and open society. There's a problem there as well if we start walling off quality content, right? First of all, we think we're making it inaccessible, right? But perhaps all we're doing is making it available exclusively to a particular model, because these models are going to be there, they're going to be trained anyway. We actually want them to be trained on high quality information, right? And so we're actually doing another project on implications of generative AI for Wikipedia. Right, and those questions arise there quite a lot. So Wikipedia has been working with OpenAI on developing a plugin for ChatGPT and subsequent models and whatnot. And as we all know, Wikipedia forms a large input into most of these models. But if that resource, which is built on these principles of open knowledge, becomes closed off and part of a proprietary system or a commercialised system even, then we need to think about the implications of that for the information that's available.
I absolutely love that point, that by walling off high quality work, you actually make the models worse. There's a current problem right now where all the AIs are learning from each other, so they progressively getting worse because there's no new, it's like kind of like stagnant water, like you're not adding anything new to the river. To answer the question about ethical use, I think the first one is that you have to be transparent if you're using it. You have to actually tell them exactly what it is. So, I don't have a problem with like non-emotive reporting in the sense that like AI can write an article about weather, for example. It's going to be this hot at this time in this area. And if you were completely transparent about that, I wouldn't care. I would still read it and I would still absorb that knowledge. It's when people are unsure. And at some point we're going to break the dam, because we kind of already have in some places, like where I think it was CNET or something that came out that they were using AI to write a bunch of their articles.
Yeah.
I brought up the Westworld example before. It's like, if you can't tell the difference, doesn't matter. I think most people don't want to read something written by a robot. They want to know that there's a human element on it. And I think this is my hot take on this, but it's going to be a thing where we're probably going to have to come up with basically a verification model that you're going to have to, with art as well, that there will be some process to prove.
Using an AI to verify AI?
No, yeah. Well, also blockchain, but anyway. Yeah, that was trained on another AI. But I think at some point, authenticity and verification will probably become a kind of currency or kind of process that we're going to have to use. And I think the start of that will be, one, to be incredibly transparent about what you're doing. I think newsrooms should be more transparent. Anyway, we aren't, and I think that's a problem why trust in media is so low. They don't understand why we do stories or why we don't do, why we've written things in certain ways, and that comes down to media literacy. The other ethical implication is, copyright as well. Like, we these models that we currently use or that are being trained off, you never really know what they learnt. And this comes back to bias. It's like you don't know where this machine got its idea of what a successful applicant or a successful resume looks like. And once you figured that out, you're kind of like, holy crap, what else has kind of gone wrong? So I think the use of AI is going to go up, and I think we should start now in terms of putting out like how it's being used, where it's coming from. We need to open up. We need to open it up. It's like, was any part of this written or generated by AI? I think the other thing that probably, I don't know if you guys would agree with this, but you know, in the writer's strike in Hollywood that just ended, one of the provisions was that there's no scripts could be touched, edited, or corrected or generated by AI. And I think at this point, maybe not necessarily in unions, but there probably needs to be at some level the reporters drawing that line as well, where you're not expected to, you know, I can imagine I won't say which newsrooms, but there's certainly some newsrooms in Australia and other places that I've worked around the world, which would absolutely, without any kind of like blinking an eye, go, don't worry about writing your headlines. Just let the robot or the AI do that for you. And I feel like that's something that has to probably come from reporters as well, and that needs to be codified sooner than later.
Strike.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, part of the problem there is that you know, it's all very well to engage in the rhetoric of ethical journalism and say we're going to maintain, you know, our high journalistic standards and so on, of accuracy and impartiality and so on. But you know, when the chips are down and the pressure's on and you've got to get a story out, you know, what's the easiest thing to do? You know, go to ChatGPT, get your 300 words, your 400 words, out you go, I've made my deadline. You know, so those kinds of pressures that are put on journalists are going to be a big part of the problem. And, you know, it's a question of how strong are those, how strong is the support there for journalists, if you like, to do the right thing. I think that's going to be a big ethical challenge.
Yeah.
Sorry, I wanted to ask some questions on what you were saying now. With AI learning and with the output that it's going to be giving, is there any fear or thoughts of like it'll develop like this perfect model, and when it's giving output, it's all going to be like very similar and not have that like human personality and like our individuality and creativity?
Yeah. I mean,
like our Canva, everyone uses the same templates. You can tell it's like Canva design.
I mean, you can kind of, everyone, like when ChatGPT came out, said, oh my God, it sounds so human. And, you know, there was that really annoying cliche about a year ago where it's like the news reader would read out a story. It's like, just so you know, that was written by a Gen A, and every fucking person did it. And it got so old annoying so quickly. And, you know, I think we've got to the point where we can kind of spot what AI is kind of like, something that's written by AI sounds like, because, for example, it works really well off Wikipedia. It's a huge data source. The only way you can have a perfect model is if the data source itself is perfect, and I don't think that's ever going to get there. I mean, sometimes news writing can be quite formulaic, but that's not a bad thing either. Like, you know, we put the most interesting thing in the lead, you know, lead,
who, what, when,
context, quote, you know, like that's a really standard model because it really works. And so unless the readership or what readers want drastically changes, one, I don't think we're going to get a perfect model, and two, I think it's that big of a deal if the model gets really, really good. It's not a bad thing, I don't particularly think.
This has been really interesting discussions. Unfortunately, we've run out of time for this panel sort of time, but we'll move on to pizza and drinks, and so feel free, guys, to come chat to your guests and ask any other questions that we didn't get up to in this discussion so far.